Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today on our launch webinar of the 2021 Sixth Procurement Power List. So it's great to see so many of you joining us from all over the world. I've been looking through the chat from where you've all joined us, and we've got an absolute stellar panel today. So we're really lucky to have such a great number of people joining us to talk about this really important list that we've launched. You can find out more about the list on the Procurement Power List website. So some of you may have seen the names on that on those slides as you've joined, so you can find out loads more about everyone who's on the list, all their photos and biographies and more about them on the Procurement Power List website. So thank you to our sponsors, iValuer, for helping us pull this together today and helping us pull the list together and publicize it and creating this webinar for you today. Also, we'd like to make this session as interactive as possible, so please make sure you continue on the chat. I can see all of you letting us know where you've joined from today, so make some new connections and join in the conversation. Also, if you have any questions for our panel, please submit them in the Q&A box. People often put them in the chat and they sometimes get missed, and make sure you add those questions as early on as possible so we manage to get through as many as possible. So here goes. I'm going to introduce Malcolm Harrison, our group CEO, to join me now. We'll talk a bit about the list before we invite our panel to join us on this important discussion of equality, diversity and inclusion. Malcolm, welcome.
Emma, hi.
Hi there.
Good, nice to see you.
Thanks for joining. I just wanted to, a great list again this year. We've been doing the Procurement Power List since 2018. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on why you think this list is so important for the profession.
As you say, we've been doing this since 2018, and this is all about raising the profile of the profession and raising the profile of some of the great leaders that we have in the profession. And to me, the SIP Procurement Power List is sort of a benchmark of the effect that procurement can have on organizations. It's showcasing some of the best leaders who are really engaged in major change or transformational projects. And we try and mix this list up. We can't try and refresh it. And I think we've had about 100 people on over the 3 years. And I think this year, Emma, and you'll probably correct me, but I think we've had probably more change this year than ever before. And that's down to our panel. And we have a panel of experts who recognize the work of some of the most inspiring leaders who are raising the profile of the profession. And it's particularly about what those leaders have done in this year, helping to build stronger connections with procurement and supply in their organizations, delivering business strategy, making decisions on strategic options, often people focused on the ethical sourcing on a sustainability agenda. And importantly for me, why this is perhaps such an important list is these people, these leaders of our profession, they have real credibility within the wider procurement community. So they don't just deliver, but they have a reputation for delivering and delivering again, and for doing it in the right way. And perhaps most importantly, they have a reputation for delivering through their people and really developing their people into the great professionals that this profession needs for the future. And we really hope, the last thing I would say about the list and why I think it's so important is what we hope is that CEOs will look at this list and they'll see the procurement leaders on it and they'll say, yes, that's what we want to have in terms of the leadership of procurement and supply in our organization.
And we've got people from across the globe joining us today, so it's probably worth us noting actually the geography of the list. Usually we hold this event face to face in London, so it's probably worth noting that the leaders on the list are all based within Europe. Well, no, that they're not often based in Europe, but that's their geographical area. So they may be based across the world, but that they are responsible for large European teams. So that's probably worth clarifying, because I just looked down the list and we've got people joining us from all over the world here. So tell me a bit about the list and how it's decided.
So as you rightly say, this is absolutely a European focused list. Not every person on the list, though, is based in Europe. but they have big operations inside Europe. So for instance, I think we've got CPOs of Mars and Pepsi on there, two big American corporations, but both with very big operations in Europe. So the way we put this list together is we have a panel, an independent panel from the major executive search agencies who understand the profession and understand who the great leaders in the profession are better than anybody. We start with a pretty long list, Emma. We start with probably 200 names from a wide range of sectors, and everybody on that list is discussed at length. And I think it's really important to remember that this list is a snapshot in time. So we're really looking at what people have done, or the panel's looking at what people have done this year. So have they picked up additional responsibility, or have they started on exciting new projects? So there are many great people out there that are still doing great things in terms of leadership, procurement, and supply, and they might not be on the list. So I think it's really important to remember that this list is not sort of just an exclusive list of reflecting all of the great leaders. No, it's the people that we've singled out this year. And why I think it's important to CPOs is what I would say to CPOs who are on the list and those who are not on the list actually as well, it's really important that you shout out about what you're doing, about what your successes are and what you're able to achieve for the wider procurement community. Because we all procurement professionals know the best way you learn is you learn from others. And therefore, I think other people in the community, when they hear some of the great things that people on this list have done and are doing, that is, I think, really, really inspiring. And by the way, can I also just add to say, we're actually starting to see people come off the list and then back on it again over time.
Yeah.
And I hope that tells me something about the dynamic nature of this list, which, as I say, it's a snapshot in time. And to me, what's actually much more important is that broader community of chief procurement officers across the globe who are just great, great ambassadors for the wider profession.
Absolutely. So tell me a bit about some of the CPOs on the list this year.
Well, we're delighted to see many new names on the list this year. I think we've got nearly 80% new people on the list. Now, that is a big, big change from what we've had in the past. So typically, we've had 45, 50% of change from year to year. So it's a big, big change. The list is very much based on merit. Some of the CPOs are people that I don't know, that SIPS doesn't know, and they're not actually directly connected with SIPS. So it's about the panel, and it's about that broader panel that's recognizing people that are really leading by example and achieving great things for the profession, and they're respected by their peers in the wider community. I think what I'd also say about the list this year, and some perhaps really interesting things, is that we've got a much more diverse mix this year. So if you look at the on the move category, and that recognizes people who have recently started new roles and sort of up and coming, and perhaps will be on the main list next year. So 60% of the on the move category this year are women, which is great. We don't have any targets in terms of diversity. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. But what, to me, this does reflect is the fact that we are getting greater diversity, be that ethnic diversity, be that gender diversity in that leadership community. And that's fantastic to see. This was never going to be a quick fix, Emma, but it's something that is absolutely important for the profession. And what I want to see is the profession continuing to embrace equality, to create those inclusive environments, which then allows a very diverse leadership team to bring the real benefit to your function and to the organization in which you work. But this is a real challenge, and I think it's really important that as a leadership of procurement and supply, we really face this issue head on.
Yes, no, absolutely. And, I think, like you say, it would be wrong to have targets, and we would love to see more diversity on the list, but I think there's a lot to do really within the profession to grow that, and then hopefully years to come we will see that diversity come through on the list. Thank you, Malcolm. I'd like to invite our panel to join us at this point, so I'll just invite everyone on. We've got Angela Q from Lufthansa, who's on the list this year, Lucy Harding from Odgers Berndtson, who's one of our expert panels who helps pull the list together. Welcome. Rachel Legg from Johnson Matthey and Rob Woodstock from HMRC. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. So Lucy, I wanted to start with you, if we can. So following on from how we make the makeup of the list, and we always get together, and I think we spent 2 sessions this time deliberating the list. So spent quite a considerable amount of time discussing everybody. How much does the list differ from year to year? Can you give us a bit of a flavour on what kind of movement we see year on year? And I guess it's more increasingly difficult to stay on the list year on year as a result of that.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for asking me to join. And obviously great as always to be part of this. And I have been part of it, as you say, Emma, since its inception, actually. And it gets increasingly harder. And I think this year in particular, given we've been in a COVID year, everybody has stepped up. Particularly what we've seen is the supply chain and the procurement function has been at the heart of many organizations' ability to keep producing, keep making, supporting their colleagues around the world. So in particular this year, it's very difficult to just pick out 30 people above their potentially above their peers. But it's fantastic that it changes. And actually, as Malcolm said, we start off with a very long list. And the start of that review is actually who is on the list from last year, and that question about which, should they remain on, or should we look at refreshing? And that's really where we start, as well as then looking at lots of people in new roles, people that have been on the move yet list from previous years, and how are they now doing year 2 in their role, and what are we starting to see? So it's a really fantastic and a really rich discussion across my peers in the other executive search firms, where we all know lots of people, we all work with clients, we work with people as candidates and get an inside track, really. But pulling out Malcolm's point, it's also really important for people in leadership roles to be a leader at their professional level. So not just internally within their own business, but actually what they're sharing externally. And again, this year, we've seen a huge amount of collaboration and sharing of support, of experiences, of how to solve problems, how to support workforce, how to support people working remotely. And we've seen lots of new faces come kind of to the public face of procurement this year, because they've been thrust into that limelight by their organisation, by the pandemic, and they've had to stand up and respond. So I think that has played a big part this year in it being such a refreshed list, which has been great, and great to explore new people and new profiles. And that's really supported increasing the level of diversity, I think, as well.
Great, thanks. And on that note, on diversity, how do you think procurement as a profession compares with other professions in terms of that diversity mix at a senior level?
I think we're on a par. I mean, I have colleagues here who focus across the HR function, across finance, CIO, as well as within all those industry commercial leadership roles. And actually, because we are a function, we cut across lots of different industries. So actually, I think at a macro level, we're doing really well. But there is still challenges in particular industries in terms of level of diversity, and maybe more manufacturing or engineering-led environments versus consumer or retail, which is exactly the same as everybody else. But what I think is absolutely fantastic, and Malcolm alluded to it, is to see a significant proportion of the newly appointed CPOs coming who are female. To have 60% of that list female shows the direction of travel, it shows the momentum that we're seeing, and I think it shows the commitment of organisations to hire first-time CPOs from who are female and maybe unproven, which is brilliant to see. And we will hopefully see the actual main list moving more towards a 50-50 gender split in the next year or 2.
That would be excellent. And what factors, in your opinion, do you think are having a greater impact on diversity at senior levels?
I think it's two-way. I think positive impact on diversity is an absolute awareness by every organisation out there that they need to have a diverse leadership team. So the work that I do in my field, whether my clients challenge me or not, we challenge ourselves to ensure we have a diverse shortlist every single time we put a list of people together. So that's fantastic. That is only going to support reaching that gender parity. I think we're fighting against the tide, though, actually, in some areas. I think that, and there for sure is evidence that shows that females have struggled more through the pandemic, and we have lost females at all levels of organisations because of the competing priorities of kind of home pressure, family, work, and everything else that has meant some have left the workforce. But equally, a new area of diversity that is coming into mainstream dialogue, and I think is going to gather significant momentum that we all need to be focused on, is supporting women at a latter stage of their career as they go through menopause. We focus significantly on filling the hopper at the kind of the graduate end, the mid-career end, supporting working families and working mums through that time in their life, with very little attention paid to actually the leakage that we're getting at the senior end of a woman's career. And you think about, it's the time when they're asked to take on probably the most visible, high-pressured role of their career to date, at a time when they could be dealing with lots of competing issues in terms of family, teenage children, elderly parents, and medical issues related to menopause. So I think that's something we need to keep working on across all organisations, to support keeping those really talented women in the workplace when they've got a wealth of experience and wisdom to offer, and helping them through that period. And of course, there's still so much more to do. I've focused an awful lot on gender, but there is a huge amount of work we need to do around ethnicity, and creating much more diverse, diverse pools of talent from an ethnic diverse background, which still has a long, long way to go across all areas of corporate life.
Excellent. Thanks, Lucy. That was really interesting. So, Rachel, if I can turn to you first, if you could talk us through some of the different things that you're doing at Johnson Matthey, really, to what your organisations are doing to attract and retain better diversity.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So here at Johnson Matthey, well, we've recently launched our new sustainability goals. We very much believe that diversity builds much stronger businesses, and one of those is that by 2030 that we'll have 40% female representation across all of our management levels. So, how do we actually make that a reality, right? So in recruitment, well, we've refreshed, repositioned, and we're now leveraging our employer value proposition, which is an integral pillar designed to build awareness of JM and to attract that diverse talent. We're using social media channels such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and they help us identify some of those demographics of the user profile, so that enables us to be far more targeted in the advertising, the engagement, and indeed the recruitment of those different groups. And that enables us also then to put more relevant content, such as women in engineering, STEM, women in business forums, etc. So we can bring content that's relevant to those communities. And then throughout the sourcing and attraction activity itself, well, we strive to make sure that we've got those diverse candidate pools and interview panels, and we make sure that we're really clear from the outset, a bit like a procurement activity, what are those requirements, what's those decision-making criteria, so that we can help and ensure that that unconscious bias isn't coming into the process. And we've also refreshed our interview skills, and we've got conscious inclusion training in our recruitment processes, and all hiring people have to go through that process. So that's the recruitment. On the inclusion and belonging, well, this year, for the first time, we've asked all of our employees across Johnson Matthey for a number of self-identification demographic questions. That's in our annual engagement survey. And this is allowing us to gain those insights into the experience and the perceptions, the D&I of different communities in JM in different places across the world, and ensure our actions to support them and retain those diverse talents are specific and very much intentional. So that's been a game changer for us. And we're building out on our community employee resource group. So for quite some time, we've had Pride in JM, Black and Gender employee networks, Diversability, and we've now extended that to veterans and indeed families. And that was a learning point that we had indeed through the pandemic, as Lucy's touched on. So a much needed employee resource group there. And also, as Lucy's mentioned, we're now engaging with our people to ensure that we can support our talented women through the menopause. Then with regards to people development, well, throughout our talent processes, we're now able to identify those diverse people with high potential, and we've also targeted development of diverse talents. We're focusing initially on gender and nationality at this stage, but that will extend out so that we can build our future leadership profiles. And from a procurement point of view, well, we're making good progress actually with our ED&I strategy. We've now achieved gender balance with our global procurement leadership team, with over a third of those having ethnic diversity as well. And across our JM1 procurement community, we're at 40% of our members now being represented by women. So we're making good progress, but still lots to do.
Excellent. Thanks, Rachel. And Angela, let us know a little bit about what you're doing in your organisation.
Rachel has said a lot of things. We are doing similar things at Lufthansa Group. So for us, maybe 1-2 specific things, which me personally is also driving, is how do we make procurement much more inclusive? Because if you think about what is the ideal the buyer or a CPO, the other would say, yeah, typically very good analytics, very good in negotiations, can compare offers, a little bit quiet maybe. There's a perception about procurement. I think therefore for we as procurement leaders, one of my ambitions really to make procurement a much more inclusive function for many other people. I on purpose hire people from sales, from product management, from marketing, from finance, because for me, I think this is a function where we should not just exclude only this type of people are ideal for purchasing or procurement, but there are other type of personalities or knowledges, experiences are very much helpful to make procurement function, first of all, much more inclusive. Secondly, would enable us to speak the language of our stakeholders. I find extremely important if CPOs stop talking about only procurement, but rather use business languages to get buy-ins, to get collaborations through different partners. I think that's extremely important that you have also hired people from those functions, that they can bring their ideas, their views into the overall procurement strategies setting up or also action plans. And I find extremely important also, that's why our performance increase year over year is due to this diversified workforce. And on purpose, I was hiring those experts and make their experiences, knowledge, as a kind of adds on to our whole procurement community. And on purpose, of course, I also encourage my people after some years of procurement, go to other functions, because then through doing so, you can build also a network of middle level senior leaders who really has a procurement background, who can understand what are the challenges we have, and then also look for opportunities, how we procurement and also the internal stakeholders together with suppliers can create new innovative solutions. So I think this is something I'm passionate at. Hopefully also the panel will be sharing my idea, my thoughts that we can also do something together under the leadership of CIPS. There's something we could create a much more diverse workforce at least.
And Angela, it's so good to hear you say that, because I think what you say about having a really diverse team, yes, gender is important, yes, ethnicity is important, but also that diversity of thought. I go back to some of the teams I built years ago, and bringing in people from sales, from marketing, from IT, from operations, manufacturing roles. They give you as a leader, I think, so much more credibility, because people then look at you and say, yeah, well, within the team that you, Angela, have built, you really understand what the business is all about. So good to hear you say that.
Thank you very much for the feedback. Yeah, because I think it's really one major stepstone also for career development of a person, right? If you look for a CEO type of person, has that person also done one step at procurement function? I think this is one thing I try to build up together with HR, with our development department, really look at how we make that a one very key foundations of a person who becomes senior leaders in the future.
Excellent, thank you. And Rob, I know that you're part of a big group on the in central government looking at ED&I, and I think you're a race champion part of this group. Can you let us know a little bit about that project and the progress you've made to date?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to comment on Angela's comment first, though, because I thought that was just great, Angela. I believe, very similarly to you, that bringing different skill sets and experiences together is really important to doing a top-class job and getting great solutions, because we're in the business actually of delivering solutions, not contracts. I think we've done the cross-functional thing of bringing people together from different areas in an organization. I think being able to harness diversity in all its dimensions is another layer of thinking about this. So I saw a brilliant TED talk called Dare to Disagree, which was about the notion of getting people with fundamentally different backgrounds and experience to test each other's ideas. And I think that goes to neurodiversity, as I think Malcolm mentioned, as well as people's functional backgrounds. That soft set of skills about being able to draw out of people what they can bring to the party in creating an environment where challenge is is valued, is I think part of the future of our function. And as a profession, if we can codify that and help our people to develop those skills, certainly in my teams, I'm helping people to understand that that's part of the skill set we're looking for, and that I value leaders and teams who can bring those different views together and to develop, I don't know, inclusive solutions. And there are many examples of those we could talk about. On the government commercial function, there are about 6,000 people across the government commercial function, all from different central government departments with different organisational priorities. But we've created an umbrella of inclusion, diversity, and equality actions to bring a sense of cohesion across the procurement community in government. We're aligning that with the civil service overall view on diversity and inclusion, but also making sure that bottom up we listen to the various networks, and we have similar networks to those that have been described, and we bring all of that together in a set of themes. It's really important to us to represent the society we serve, and people pay, our citizens pay for the services that government delivers, so we want to make sure that what we're delivering back to them is fit for purpose, and that the people who are performing those roles represent society. We've done a lot of work on lived experience. I think that I think that the quant stuff that Rachel was talking about, we're conscious of that. We look at the numbers. We've got some quite good data, but over the past year, we've really focused again on the soft culture change aspects of our work, and making sure that people can be themselves, that they're respected, that they're heard, that their contributions valued. And that's been a sort of an act of emotional intelligence, building emotional intelligence in our organisation. We've supported talent from underrepresented groups, because in our data we see, as you go higher up the organisation, various underrepresented groups are, the disparity is a little less lower down in our organisation, but it's quite stark higher up. And of course, making sure that in our supply chains we're doing whatever we can to inculcate our values into the services that have been delivered through our supply chain. So we have 10% of our evaluation of any procurement as a minimum now dedicated to this topic, either in environmental sustainability or development of skills, recovery from COVID, or ED&I. And there's some really good examples of that creating that connection, that golden thread between ED&I and the end products we deliver. On race, maybe I'll talk to the lived experience work that we've done. We've had Black employees talk about their experience of work, really through the really sad event last year of George Floyd's murder. That's the point at which I think our work on race moved from being the responsibility of the network to being something that everyone needed to understand and to lean into. And so we've had some of those really difficult experience sharing moments, and then colleagues have really responded well to that. We've delivered training to everyone on how to support colleagues, understanding micro behaviors, thinking about the way we recruit, but actually in the day-to-day work, if you see something that isn't quite right, to know what to do about it. And it's been surprising in a way that people feel that they can see something that's wrong, but don't necessarily know how to deal with those situations. So helping people to deal with some of that. We've changed our mix of assessors, so we have a assessment and development centre through which our people are recertified, accredited, re-qualified, but also for all the people being recruited in. And we've changed the mix of our assessors so that they're more diverse. We've changed our panels so they're more diverse. We've looked at the case material that is used, which actually, looking back on it, has bias built into it. And we've made big changes to all of that. And to Lucy's point on people being unproven, I think through changing the panel and the assessment process, it's created a new level of belief from those from underrepresented backgrounds when they walk in the room that they are in an environment which will evaluate them fairly and be a positive work experience for them. So all of that stuff, I think, as well as the quantitative work, has really moved us on in terms of the culture in the commercial function. Much more work to do, but that's really been the biggest advance we've made over the past year.
Excellent, thank you. Leading on from what Angela mentioned earlier, really, and Lucy, maybe you could pick this one up as a starter for us. Can we talk a little bit about the benefits of having a more diverse team? I mean, I think that it no doubt hits the bottom line. Have you got any?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, again, going back to the original focus around gender diversity, going back 10, 15 years, I think probably McKinsey and every other major strategy house and consulting firm put, statistics together that looked at profitability and financial success of the largest companies, and there's a direct correlation between that and the diversity of their organizations and their leadership teams. So there's definitely a business case for it. We shouldn't need one, but there is, and that's the reality. So I think that's, if you have to go down that line, then there's some statistics there to back it up. But I think more than that, for a start, personally, it's more fun working in a diverse environment. I couldn't think of anything worse than working with people that look, that are all the same gender, all the same profile. It's not much fun. You don't learn very much. But I think it's really important about role modeling too, and having diverse senior leaders that inspire people coming through, that feel that they've got something to aim for, that they can really see themselves achieving what they want to achieve because they have people in those roles that look like them, that sound like them, that have some common ground with them. So there's yes, there's a raw business case for sure, but actually I think it's about more than that. I think it drives your retention. It definitely drives your attraction. When I work with candidates, what they're really, the two themes that they are really interested in knowing about now are how diverse is the organization and what is their commitment to sustainability. And those two things actually go very close together. The organizations that tend to be more committed to being sustainable tend to be more diverse. And those are really, really important both for attraction and retention. So there is a whole wealth of reasons why organizations should strive and should continue to be diverse and support diversity in all its guises, in every single aspect of diversity, and not just get hung up on gender or just focus on ethnicity, because those outwardly are very easy to see and easy to measure. But actually, to Rob's point and to Angela's point, I think about diversity of background, diversity of thought, but also social mobility, really important too. So what I would urge leaders to do is when they're thinking about diversity, great, first ticking the box, that is absolutely an action point, but think about it in its broadest sense, because that is what is going to make organizations richer, more successful, more fun to be in, more attainable for everybody, and you'll keep your people for longer, and you'll attract the best talent in the market.
Thanks, Lucy. Angela, I can see you coming in there.
Yes, just to add what Lucy just said, I think my personal experience is actually diversity is about a choice of a leadership, because you as leaders, you start with who do you want to take on board into your team, right? Are you looking for the same patterns, or are you looking for really different people? I think I'm very much cautious and aware actually to lead diverse teams is not always easy, because people think different. The forming phase of a team, it takes longer, right? Because until everybody get on board it, until they align themselves, this takes just a bit longer. It's not the same like you have the same group of people, same experiences, they come to a conclusion much easier, much quicker, right? I think it's a choice of the leaders, as we do, to really think about, am I looking for an easier job, like I have everyone the same like me, or I'm looking really for true diversity? But then I want to boost the performance. I want to have everybody feel there's a belonging inside, right? That everybody can voice their voice without a fear that I'm saying the wrong things. What I'm particularly do like in meetings, very simple techniques, really, because that's introvert, extrovert already, right? The extroverts tend to speak quite loud the first 5 minutes. The introvert has never a chance to speak out because all too loud or jumping around. So on purpose, I usually do the brainstorming session, ask everybody to write on a piece of paper first their ideas. Then everybody of the round table have a chance to speak up. Otherwise, then if you say go by flow, sometimes it does not work, right? You lose the best opinions or ideas from the introverts because they are not speaking up. So I think on purpose, this is really a task to really know what's the diversified team you have and also address those needs, that you create a platform that everybody can shine together, right, in different forms. I think that's why it's so great that Lucy also mentions you create a happiness at the end, because I always said to my team, there are three questions you have to ask yourself regularly to say, have I contributed to the success of the company? Or have I learned something new, right, from my peers? Do I have support from peers who has different knowledges, different networks? Therefore, I think if you have that sense of belonging and sense of no fear than to voice different opinions, and at the same, I think it's much more fun, as Lucy said.
Excellent. Lucy, I think you wanted to come in there.
So yeah, it's just to build on Angela's point, actually, I think what we mustn't forget is inclusion. So just building a diverse team is great, but actually you've got to then, as leaders, make sure that people feel that they can use that voice that they've been given. So there's a lot to do around leadership style, including people, making them feel welcome, that their voice is heard, that it's not just enough to have diversity around the table. And also, I think when you're building that level of diversity, just having one female or one ethnically diverse person on your leadership team and think job done, not enough. You've got to put other people around those individuals, so then they're not just one lone voice on their own. And be conscious of the environment that you're bringing them into. They will potentially need support. They'll need guidance. They'll need to help navigate the environment that you're putting them into, to give them the confidence to use their voice and raise those questions. So I think it's two parts to the question. One is building the team, and then the other one is putting the right support and leadership around them so that they flourish.
Excellent. Rob, I can see you've got your hand up. Rachel, I will come to you in 1 second. Oh, you're on mute, Rob. £10 in the mute box.
Strongly agreeing with Angela on the need to consciously think through how to harness the diversity in any given team. So build the diversity, but also harness it. Some good comments in the chat around that. Something I'm thinking about for the future is how that's going to work in a hybrid working environment, as some workforces are now getting back into a part office, part home working arrangement. And that whole thing about allowing people to reflect and bringing them in if they're not in the room, it's quite a complex thing. I think as leaders and in our teams, building these quite different skills is going to be critical to success in the future. I wanted to bring out some specifics in terms of getting a different set of eyes on a very practical kind of construction project. So we've developed these government hub buildings up and down the country. Historically, it's been a very sort of statutory arrangement. So you build something that's safe, that meets building requirements, and away you go, people go and work in it. We've really done, I think, an excellent job by getting more voices heard in the design of those buildings. So they're inclusive design now for enabling those with disability is not statutory. It's about the customer and how it feels for them and having them involved in the process. Some of the artwork in our buildings, we heard from some of our colleagues, made them feel alienated. A lot of government buildings have artwork which is verging on sort of colonial. They're hark back to the past, and there's pride in the past of Great Britain, but there's also the current and the future. So can we have a bit more celebration of diversity on our walls? So kind of bringing some of those really practical things in. Feminine hygiene products, we're getting more comfortable talking about being a woman in business, not having these conversations in private, but actually getting them in there, getting them into the way we design our buildings, and what it feels for those who are using the buildings, seeing them as the ultimate customers and hearing all the different perspectives. So I think the procurement function has got a really critical role in bringing all those, it's a real opportunity to bring all those different voices and perspectives together. We've done it cross-functionally, now we can do it on this level of being inclusive and be the driver of that for the organisations that we serve.
Malcolm, you're going to make a point there.
Yeah. Emma, it's so good to hear this debate, because for me, diversity is incredibly important, always has been really important, but diversity without inclusivity, without creating that inclusive environment, you don't get the benefits of diversity. So in many ways, to me, actually inclusivity is even more important, because you've got to create that right environment. And just hearing our panel today talking about inclusivity and getting that environment right, such that you really can support different people, you can encourage different people, you can encourage that diversity of thought. I think that is incredibly important. And I do hope that we hear more people talking about not just about diversity, about inclusivity and creating that really inclusive environment. And that's one of the great things that leaders can do. And so for me, having inclusivity and having the procurement leaders who are really driving inclusivity is one of the things that I hope we're going to hear a lot more talked about in the future.
Great, thanks. Rachel, I wanted to come to you because we've talked about this having a culture of that this is important to you as your organisation, and I think this is something that really resonates with Johnson Matthey, and linking it to the sustainability angle as well, to making sure that people are really aware of what your organisation stands for. And I think that's something that resonates with Johnson Matthey a lot, isn't it?
It is, yeah, indeed. Procurement professionals, we've got a very significant, if you want me to talk about where procurement professionals have got a significant role to play, both within our organisations, as we've just touched on now, but also in our supply chains, it's significant and very much a wide-ranging role. When we think about that life cycle of those supply chains, whether that's from clarifying our standards and expectations of our supplier code of conduct, defining and driving the makeup of our supply base, how we select our suppliers, on what basis do they align with our organisation's values and our ED&I aspirations, for example, how we work with, how we develop our supply partners, right the way through to standing behind our principles and exiting those who ultimately fall short. And of course, we need to ensure that our own organisation and operational practices what we preach. And one way that we can do that is through the adoption of an equality impact assessment. It's a lot of things that we've been talking around today. And this is a very straightforward evidence-based approach that we can have, and it's designed to help our organisations ensure that our policies, our practices, our events, our decision-making processes are fair, and that they're not presenting barriers to different participation or disadvantage any particular groups from that. And they help us to ensure that we understand the potential effects of any of our policies, our decision making, by assessing the impacts on different groups, both externally and internally. It advises on impacts that are identified and allows us to sort of take mitigation actions so that we've got decisions that are transparent and evidence-based. And a recent example of that in Johnson Matthey for us was the outsourcing of our supply partner selection of our global security services. And here we took great care to establish that diverse selection panel. We've talked about diversity in its broadest sense here, and engage our employee resource group so that we could bring that breadth of perspective to the process. And that when we ran the equality impact assessments, it identified the need to review and revise the outsourced partners uniform policy to ensure that that was much more inclusive than its standard offering. Now you think, well, what's in a uniform policy? Well, this really was to make sure that we enabled individuals to select uniforms from one broader, more inclusive uniform range. And in here, that was instead of the typical, separate those predetermined uniform lists for a man or a woman. So there's no one size fits all approach here. And this one simple change through that equality impact assessment, that served to support individuals' choice. So without them having to declare themselves in any way, without needing to ask for it, based on what demographic was meaningful to them as an individual, whether that's age, gender, disability, sexuality, and religion, for example. So there are simple tools that we can use right across everything that we do as procurement professionals. And I really encourage everybody just to sort of reflect actually what, where and how as individuals they can drive ED&I, because there's loads for us to go at, in everything that we do as procurement professionals, working collaboratively, pulling on those different diverse groups like the employee resource or any other community groups that you've got available. Start using those equality impact assessments in our decision-making process, and it will generate and create a whole new perspective for us to move through that ED&I agenda.
Excellent. Angela, following on from Rachel's point about our role as procurement professionals, not just within our teams, but within our supply chains, can you let us know some of the stuff that you've been doing in your organisation?
Yes, I saw one question about we didn't spoke so far to help enterprises who employ disabled people, right? I think one of the practice we have had at Lufthansa Group is we have such suppliers. In aviation, unfortunately, the bar is very high, right? The entry ticket is quite expensive to become a supplier of aviation industry. So therefore, we have identified such factories actually close to our locations. We have spent a lot of efforts to qualify those type of suppliers and make them the sub-supplier of our suppliers. So basically, we help them provide knowledge about the products, the management experiences, and help those suppliers to grow. What is the return of such investment? Is like we gain a lot of inspiration actually, because some of my team went on site to look at the facility of these enterprises who employ disabled people. And we were so inspired about their passion, about their ability, and about their strive for excellence attitude. Those is kind of learnings actually we get it out of this whole exercise as kind of, wow, actually they are maybe just physically not fit as we are, but mentally, intellectually, they are as fit as we are. So we should not discriminate them. Yeah. So I think we spend a lot of efforts doing this in the past. In the future, we also look at, there are certain categories which don't have that high expectation on certification, in terms of looking at supplier selections. So we want to integrate the ESG aspect, also looking at our decision-making processes to make sure that we have also proper supplier base, to be established and help them to, further establish themselves.
Rob, from a supply level, any examples that you've got or initiatives that you're rolling out?
I was looking for the golden thread between the service that's being delivered to an end user or an end customer, and then how we can look differently at our request of a supplier base. I think because we're delivering to citizens so often, the makeup of our suppliers and the way they deliver services is really important. We run a restart program, getting people back into employment and developing their skills. And quite often in the past, it's been a bit sort of parent-child in that relationship, and there hasn't really been much empathy. I think that's been some of the feedback from participants on those programs. So, our last round of sourcing support, we were really clear that we want those who are delivering the service to be from a range of backgrounds that reflected the participants. And this is a really more of a social mobility aspect than anything else. And we've heard from participants in the program now that the way the service is coming across, the customer service, the connection with the participants is now bringing a much healthier pull through of participants being connected with the right support, feeling as if they're being supported by us genuinely. It's not just a tick box exercise. So I'm always looking for that. I think there are many things that we can do. And I completely agree with Rachel that in the way we specify for our suppliers what we're expecting of them, that we can encourage the right behaviours. Also obsessed about this idea of a golden thread and really thinking about what's the end product and how can we connect that with a responsible sourcing decision, which includes ED&I.
Thanks, Rob. Lucy, I wondered if you could give us any insights as well on, I mean, we've talked about things from a leadership level here, but are we seeing a more positive outlook in terms of diversity and inclusion further down the ranks? So does the picture look encouraging going forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think it does. And as I said earlier, I think we can see that through the On the Move group, a much higher proportion of women. I think it's 60% actually, 60-40, which is fantastic. And then, yeah, through the entry levels, I think, we see lots of diverse candidates coming through, starting out their profession in procurement and supply chain across all aspects of diversity. And I've always been a huge supporter of procurement being a brilliant place to start your career, whether you stay in it or whether you don't. The visibility across your business, in the inside and the outside in terms of supply base gives you is a fantastic grounding. So yeah, I definitely see the pipeline is much richer in terms of diversity, and equally I think the sustainability agenda is really helping that. There's a real understanding that organizations are responsible not just for what happens under their own roof, but actually what happens all the way down the tiers of the supply chain. And that's a really interesting angle for procurement and supply chain leaders, and that will attract a different, talking about diversity of thought, a different group of people that want to actually be involved in supply chain and procurement from that angle, not the traditional cut and thrust of negotiation and cost savings. So it's a very different mindset that's coming into procurement as well, actually, as we're seeing coming through those earlier ranks, which reflects the different expectations that boards have from their procurement function now. And again, I think COVID has massively helped with that in terms of supply chain risk, supply chain supply chain visibility, security of supply. Where actually do our products come from? We didn't really know that, and we should have known that. So it's broadening out the understanding of what and the responsibility that a sourcing and supply chain function has, which absolutely and naturally will broaden out its attraction to people coming into the profession who thought it was just about negotiation.
Absolutely. I mean, the past year we've had business leaders from across the globe, and even the Queen talking about procurement in their speech. So and just profile raising. And
just to add, at the other end of that scale, for the CPOs, on the panel and on the list and on this call, steadily growing is the momentum. And don't all rush at once, please, because there's not that many opportunities out there, but an interest from boards to look at this community of leaders for non-exec positions because of that awareness of the importance and rigor around their supply chain.
Excellent stuff. And I think there's a real role, Rachel, wouldn't you agree, for people on this list to act as real role models and offer mentoring and encouraging young talent into the profession?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the role that we all need to play. You're a leader no matter where you are in the organization, to be quite honest with you. So, and indeed reverse mentoring. So, even like myself, I do mentoring, but I'm being reverse mentored with some of our ERG, our employee resource groups as well. And yeah, it's eye-opening, and you're never too old to learn anything, I would say.
No, absolutely. And does anyone think that the remote working has had a positive or negative impact on ED&I in our profession? Anyone want to pick that one up?
For me, actually, I think it's a pandemic had taught us a lot of lessons, right? Especially if you have friends or networks who get sick or who get, lost their lives. That's make many people, especially women, to think about what is importance in life, right? Is work or is family, right? I think that's also one of the reasons that why a lot of women quit jobs during the pandemic situations. Therefore, for me, one of the particular practice I've done is really first, 8th of March this year, I organized one webcast with all the women from my team. I asked them what I can do personally to support them, because I was a little bit feared that they would say, oh, better I stay at home forever. I want to come back anymore. So one of the big wish was really to create a community where they can hold on, because there are doubts in life. There are moments you feel weak. There's sometimes you want to just talk to a partner to discuss your concerns and before you make such decisions, right? So what I did is create a network that we meet every 2-3 weeks via a virtual lunch break. And in this lunch break, we eat together, we share our concerns, our thoughts together. But same time, we added now, let's say, inspiring talks from senior leaders from the company, but also from outside. I invited really experienced, but also very successful leaders to talk about how did they make decisions when they come to a critical point in their life. What have they considered? What have they what kind of support they ask from externally, right? Women sometimes tend to, think about ourselves or argue inside or blame ourselves, but we don't think about, let's go for a support from outside. Let's take a coach or ask somebody, right? So I think this is something like to create a kind of a community that we can come here and share our thoughts and then find a solution jointly. I think this is quite common, well accepted by the procurement community, because I called women procurement at the beginning. 3-4 weeks later, we opened up to all functions, because again, inclusion, right? Procurement should not do only procurement for those things for procurement, but rather inviting other functions. Now we have other functions joining the network, also men, voluntarily joining these functions because they said, actually we can support, because they have, again, female employees in their teams. They felt, if I come here, I listen to their thoughts, I might have a solution. So I think that helps also the men as managers to manage their teams. some of the men, they are not managers. They say, oh, actually my wife works. I did not know she might have such concerns. Yeah. So you can see that a lot of men supporting this initiative, and some of them also voiced to, we run a session on training sessions, really discuss those topics. How can we help you in the workplace to feel much more inclusive, and also to work from home, to see kids, or pets jumping around in the video calls. Now, I think now it becomes normal. I think we should become more tolerant on that. And now when the pandemic's getting over, when we talk about when it's time for them to come back, I would rather to really challenge my team to really say, hey, does everybody wants to return? If not everybody wants to return, then what are the alternatives? Yeah, I think we should allow certain flexibility for our employee to make those decisions, yeah, jointly with the company to say, this is gonna be the best way how I work. And I think we should really measure the performance instead of just hours at offices, right? The output is much more the performance, not the hours at offices. That's my personal impression.
And that, I mean, that's something we're looking at as an organisation as SIPS, and I think that's definitely on should be on leaders' agenda, don't you think, Malcolm? In this hybrid world of working and what suits everybody. I mean, there are lots of young people out there who I feel really sorry for, who are, don't have the luxury of their own offices, but like some of us do, and are desperate to get back into the office. Whereas for others, the flexibility works.
For sure, Emma, but I'm sure this is about a blend, because you are dealing with a very different and diverse workforce, and what's right for everybody is not right. Is what's right for one is not right for everybody. And yes, we've all learned that there are absolutely some things that we can do from home, we can do remotely, and that allows us then to be able to manage parenting or some of the other pressures that we have at home. But at the same time, there are undoubtedly benefits you get from groups talking together and sharing experiences. So it is undoubtedly about both. And that's what we've got to find a way of creating for the future.
Excellent. We are rapidly running out of time, so I'm going to wrap things up then. Thank you very much for our panel. That was really insightful. There's clearly lots more to do, but great work going on. So that's a really positive step. Congratulations to you guys for being on the list again this year, and congratulations to everybody else who has also been recognised on the list. If you go to procurementpowerlist.com, you will find out more about everybody on who was on the list. We've recorded this session today, so if you want to share it with people in your organization or come back to it and take another look, then that will be available from next week. Also, you will find out more about these great leaders who will be featuring throughout the year, especially at our conference in September on the 29th and 30th of September. That will be, fingers crossed, in London, COVID secure and subject to announcements, obviously. But it would be great to finally get together and start networking again. But that will definitely be a hybrid model for people to join there. Thank you to our sponsors, iValuer. And thank you for submitting all your questions and comments and being so inclusive and engaging in this important discussion. So that draws us to a close. Thank you very much indeed.